Your deliberation and your planning and the intention behind the steps that you're taking at a systematic level come through loud and clear. How have your district staff responded to the implementation of collaborative response?
The district staff, I think so one of the things I like being a member of a team. I've always valued, uh, team sports and, education is a team sport. Leadership is a team sport. As somebody once said, it's not so long ago that, leadership was described as this individualistic, heroic activity done by one person, and that's an old-fashioned way of describing leadership. Leadership is not that at all. And yes, it's important for somebody to have charisma and to be able to gather a following behind him or her. But really, the best example of leadership is when you distribute your leadership influences to others so that they themselves can become effective and important leaders across people and contexts in their own sites. So one of the things that we've done with collaborative response, we've moved it forward at the division level to say this is going to be our vehicle of choice for change leadership. This is going to be the way that we get to our destination. And Leithwood talked about the importance of academic press. That one of the leaders in the system, we have 3 roles to perform. And they're very clear, the research says. One, leaders, whether you're at the systems level or school level, but I'll stay with the systems level, we have to set direction. The second major priority is we have to develop people, the PD piece. And the third major priority is to develop the organization, where you set direction through your structures, processes, routines, and expectations. You put a strong PD plan in place that align with your priorities and that are supported by those structures. And then if you grow the people within the organization, you then by default, you grow the organization. So really there's only 2 things: set direction and develop people. And in the process of developing people, you develop the organization. So the academic press piece was a notion that we brought to bear to say, look, what does academic press mean? It means a focus on the core academic areas. Literacy and numeracy. That's why parents bring their children to school. They want them to become functionally literate and numerate. And when they are, anything is possible. We talked about instructional time. We talked about, engaged time versus time, how much time is lost within a school. We talked about student absenteeism, mental health and wellness, and behavior. Really and truly, if you look at the triangle, and I know that's not the model that's now used, but staying with that triangle for a moment, students who are at the top of the triangle from a behavioral perspective are almost always at the top of the triangle from an academic perspective as well. So we talked about this academic press piece, and and we've zeroed in with staff, and they are bought in a very significant kind of way, in my view, which is why I think I mentioned earlier, and you asked a question about the continuum of supports. We didn't have to pull and drag people through that. There was a desire to want to do that because it was seen as an important structure that will help give administrators traction as they embrace change and move it forward in their jurisdiction. The PD template that I mentioned earlier, we took it to our team. They, gave us feedback. We tweaked it. They were excited about it. We took it to administrators a couple of weeks ago. And we could have run the risk of principals saying, my God, things are becoming pretty top heavy here, heavy-handed and prescriptive. Or we could have gotten the reaction that, wow, this is fantastic. So we moved that forward, did a 1-hour session, and the feedback that came back from all of the groups was 100% positive, elated, saying this is fantastic. This takes a major load off my plate. This is wonderful. I'm so excited about this. And it was like I said to each group when I joined into the virtual meetings, I said, the intention of this document wasn't to say at 10:05 you blink your left eye, 10:40 you sneeze and rub your nose, and at 11:15 you take something out of your back pocket. It wasn't intended to be prescriptive in that way, but to set up structures so that there's things unfold automatically. And so you have more brain power, more executive function, and to do the things that are necessary to answer that third question. What do we do when we find out students are struggling with what it is that they're supposed to be learning? And so we've had some really good division buy-in at the division level. We spent some time as well making the connection between collaborative response and professional growth plans. Professional growth plans, they're required. So why don't we turn them into something beyond the compliance document? You have to do them. Why don't we make meaning out of them? Why don't we turn them into a professional diary so that each year you take notes of the things you did? I did 2 collaborative response sessions, went to the symposium, did something in the Mighty Peace Conference. And now at the end of the year, you actually have a portfolio of the journey and professional development you did during the year. Furthermore, as a leader, why wouldn't we say to all of our team, we need you to have a goal in your professional growth plan to become more functionally familiar with collaborative response as the vehicle to be more impactful in helping children learn at higher levels. And now you have everybody on staff with a common goal. And I know here in Alberta, you can't mandate that. In a former jurisdiction, we could say to everybody, you can have 3 or 4 or 5 goals in your plan, but here one must be to become assessment literate, which was one reason why we had major gains in assessment literacy, because everybody had it as a goal. But there are ways and means to build a culture whereby people see that buy-in. So we've done that both at a division level, and we're moving it through at a school-based level. I did mention earlier, we have the literacy, and I just hold these up here now. We have a literacy and numeracy framework, hot off the press. These are really excellent organizational structures that are going to be immensely useful for administrators, for brand new teachers, and yes, the seasoned teacher who who may be a little bit resistant to change, or maybe a bit jaded because a lot of the promise of changes in the past didn't unfold, partly because one of the major issues with change is that it does take a lot of work, as collaborative response does. So there's a tendency to look for greener pastures. So, a colleague of mine once said that the educational landscape is filled with, is 2 meters thick with the calcified remains of wonderful initiatives that had great promise, but they died because people aborted them prematurely. And so it's why we've said to our team at the division level, folks, you're going to get tired of hearing about collaborative response because it is not going away. We are in this for a decade or longer, and we're going to be in it for as long as we've recultured, and that's the commitment. So the people who are of the view because of past experiences, well, don't invest a lot of time into this because another group of people will come along and it will be something different. Our commitment through, and we're anchoring this now, like in our strategic plan, we're anchoring collaborative response in it. So if Jeff Thompson leaves next year and goes off into retirement, the 3-year plan is still there. The focus on literacy and numeracy is still there. And the only way you can have all students literate and numerate, and in an inclusive culture where there's all out differentiated instruction and assessment, is to have it anchored for more permanently. So we're putting structures in place at the division level that do exactly that. It's a deliberate, all out effort to anchor collaborative response in the psychic of every teacher. And yes, that requires philosophical realignment. As some of the research says, it's an identity shift for people. And that's why it's so difficult. You used to do things one way. You thought it was the best way forward. Now somebody's come along and saying that it needs to be done a different way, and you need to be convinced. So you're either going to be, most people are going to be sort of a bit, stay at home. No, I'm going to continue to do my thing. Some people resist, and then there are people who all out are saboteurs. They don't want the initiative to go ahead, and they're going to do some other things anyway. And that's Philip Selesky's work, by the way, as you probably know. So we've been building a culture with our team, Elite and I here. And at a division level, if you were to talk to somebody about collaborative response now, they'll list off a litany of things that we've done and that we're now still doing with our work in ensuring differentiated instruction and assessment, ensuring that the TQS competencies are anchored in that work. And so, the notion of differentiating instruction and assessment so that we have a fully inclusionary system, well, that's anchored in the TQS. And so really and truly, teaching is about helping to ensure we empower those students who are going to struggle even with our help to be more successful. The high flyers are going to fly high anyway. And if we, and you know what, there's nothing wrong with taking credit for the high flyers as long as you take the responsibility for those who struggle. That's a key message. Yes, the kid who's going to get 99% or 100, even if I tried to give them misconceptions to throw them off, they'll go and research and say, no, the teacher was not right there, and they'll get 99 or 100. And we should be proud of those graduates, but we need to be equally proud of the responsibility we take for the kids who will struggle right through schooling. But struggling through schooling doesn't mean they can't be successful, because our effort is to move them to the next notch and the next notch and the next notch. And they get to grade 12 and they're operating 3 grade levels below. But by golly, that's reading at a grade 9 level. They're functionally literate and can go on and do anything. It's about moving them along. And so we have put those structures in place, a lot of them at the division level, and more to come. And we do need to fine tune some of that. So I mentioned earlier our division level response to intervention for a school that's all out struggling. We have some more work to do on that as well.
Jeff, you talked about school leaders buying into the connection to the 3-year ed plan and the appreciation for the processes and structures that you've put into place for them, and that they're happy with the work that you're doing. How are you finding the response from the remainder of school staff with the focus on collaborative response and the academic press and all these other pieces that are driving success for all students?
Highly effective leaders have an ability to identify the leadership strengths that people have, and to make sure then that you put people within the system in leadership areas, or give them tasks that you know they're going to be successful with. So the distribution of leadership is all about that. So we've built that culture with administrators. And so we're trying to get the message to them that, look, this is about us empowering you so that you can go back and empower your leaders within the school, both formal and informal, to move things forward. And so what I'd say is that we're on a journey there. I think, most of the, if not all of our, I'll say this, all of our administrators have moved substantially with regard to their views about, knowledge of, and commitment to collaborative response. They've all moved significantly. I mentioned earlier, like any group of people, there are, some administrators will continue to need additional supports. We all need supports. It's going to be different for each person, just like students in a classroom. As we move down to the school level, I think it's fair to say that we will still have some misunderstanding about aspects of collaborative response. Perhaps we may still have some people who I won't say we have any saboteurs anymore, like people who just are going to go all out to prevent it from happening. But I say we might have some people who are a bit cautious and resistant, particularly. We have teachers in Div 1, Div 2, Div 3, Div 4, and then we have EAs with different roles. So the entire collective staff, do they all see collaborative response through the same lens? No, they don't. Do they all have the same common understanding right now? I would say no, probably not. But that's a part of our continued work. And so, but I would say that the response overall, I would have to say, is very positive, very upbeat. I'm seeing more and more and more evidence of teachers zeroing in, wanting to try different strategies and approaches to help ensure that students will be successful. I do have to say that at the division level, our division level staff who interface daily with teachers are playing a very critical role. So I'll give you 2 examples. So I'll give you an example from my colleague Alita's shop, where our I coaches spend a lot of time in classrooms helping I coaches or teachers to get a better grasp on what would constitute, what is universal instruction? What is that classroom support intervention tier 2 piece? What does that look like? And offering up advice to say, well, it's really too early to say that didn't work. You really need to allow 2 more weeks for that to really kick in. And you might prematurely be shifting a student from tier 2 to tier 3. That working togetherness, that we're all on the same team, we're on the same journey, that culture is being built, and slowly but surely, I think we're moving people forward in that area. I'll come to an example in the shop with the team that I work most closely with, or the sub team that I work with. So we have one of our program coordinator for Indigenous education. She takes the report card results from semester 1 and flags all of those Indigenous, self-declared Indigenous learners who are in the yellow zone. and then does a deep dive of the data to find out their story, why they're in the yellow zone, the red zone as well. But sometimes the red zone is a child who might have attended 3 days out of 50. So not that that's not unimportant, but Curtis speaks to a piece in the book about, zeroing in on the kids that with that thrust of effort, we can move them forward and we'll get that bump. So she'll zero in with the school, meet with the school administration and talk about these students and profile them and say, here are some of the strategies I'd like for you to work with your teacher on. She'll have meetings with teachers and those teachers will come on board, put the strategies in place. And then at the end of the semester, those same students are profiled and amazingly, we've seen massive shifts, say 10 students in a school in the yellow zone at the end of the semester, 8 have moved to the green or 9 have moved to the green and 1 is almost, has made some big gains and 2 students from the red have moved up. And so people are starting to get that buy-in. They're seeing that, gee, when we do deliberately zero in on students and identify what their needs are, and then go to the toolbox to pick out strategies that we think might work. And if they don't, here's 5 more that possibly will work. That yes, it's a lot of work, but eventually it makes a huge difference for students. We turn their lives around. And that is becoming motivational. So I don't want to send the message that, we've arrived and it's now on autopilot. I would to use the analogy about changes like, I guess trying to break the rust on a wheel that's stuck. You start off by everybody having to push to break the rust to get it to make John Collins going from good to great. I'm not saying that it's at the stage where you just have to have one person spinning the wheel now because it's so automatic. But what I am saying is that we've moved beyond the stage where everybody on staff has to go count 1, 2, 3 and give a big push to try to break the rust on the wheel. That the wheel is spinning and it's ever so slowly spinning more and more and more. And I don't think we have saboteurs trying to throw grist in amongst the wheel now to try to bring it to a halt. I don't even think we have resistors who are sort of, when you're not looking, pulling back on the hand. I think we have some people who still might not be pushing their all, but everybody is getting caught up in the wind associated with that revolution of the wheel of change here called collaborative response. And some people have been, all out right from the get-go, the trailblazers, and it's because of their efforts at the school level and the division level that we are making gains. And we're 2 to 3 years off, in my view, before we see the true impact, to see student achievement results going up substantially. But we are absolutely on the right road here. And, we might have to do a few detours along the way because of washed out bridges and so on. But what is crystal clear is the destination that we've charted out for everybody. And slowly but surely, we're getting the buy-in there. And, I was reminded that last year when the diploma exams were canceled, we had 2 or 3 teachers say, oh, man, what a rotten time for the patch to be canceled. We actually had teachers saying they couldn't wait to administer the PATs because of how confident they felt that their students would do because of a very substantial amount of intervention that's being done from the division level, working with teachers at the school level with a common focus and common purpose called collaborative response.
You've talked a little bit about the challenges around reculturalization and bringing everybody up to speed so that we're all moving in the same direction. What supports have been beneficial as a district in implementing collaborative response?
So I think I'd say right from the get-go, when I came on board here, the organization had gone through a couple of challenges, a lot of changeover, the unfortunate and untimely passing of a person who was in my role back in 2015, who had actually begun some work with Curtis around collaborative response, or at least engage in some conversations. But the organization has certainly put a lot of time and effort into PLCs. There's still some PLCs around now, and they serve a very useful purpose. And in fact, if they were focusing in on that question 3, we'd say, okay, now the PLC has actually flipped to the collaborative response. They had also done some important work around response to intervention. And at one of the kickoffs, a couple of years before I arrived, they actually had 2 or 3 presenters to do some work there. So those were sort of precursors to setting things up in a more optimal kind of way for collaborative response to actually move forward. And I do believe that there were a couple of schools that had reached out to Curtis, and he may have actually engaged in some conversation with them. So there was a sort of a readiness amongst some pockets within the organization that helped to make it, help to us to move forward. So I wasn't surprised at all when in June 2018, Curtis came in LinkedIn and did his half hour, 40-minute, conversation about what collaborative response was all about. I wasn't surprised when we finished the conversation, we had 100% buy-in to say, yes, let's move there. The other thing is that, I do believe we would not be as far along as we are had we not maintained a very deliberate and focused partnership with Jigsaw Learning. So if we had done a kickoff with Jigsaw Learning in August 2018, and let's say if it was exactly as good as it turned out to be at that time, and we didn't do anything else with Jigsaw Learning the following year, and even if we had another kickoff with Jigsaw Learning the next August, and we didn't do anything in between, we wouldn't have seen the gains that we've seen. So we believe that our partnership with Jigsaw Learning has been a critical element in building the capacity amongst our leaders that we want. We're all learning. I'm continuing to wrap my head around collaborative response, as is my team. And by the way, I another point I'll make here, all of my team that I work closely with, they were all given a copy of this book. And as a part of their growth plan, I did say, with some risk, I suppose, I said, I want you to have one of your goals, I want it to be a deepened understanding of collaborative response. So they all were required to read that book. And I don't read a lot of books when I can avoid it, but as you can see, I've read this book through, and I've got all kinds of little sticky tabs in it with little reminders. So I wanted them to build that knowledge themselves. That then augmented with the partnership with Curtis has been quite helpful. I mentioned earlier, we've actually embedded collaborative response in our 3-year plan. So it's impossible for any school in our jurisdiction now to meaningfully address the strategies in their 3-year education plan without actually embracing collaborative response, unless they say, okay, we're going to now go back and do an updated version of the PLC, which I'd say, well, yeah, that's what that's what collaborative response is, PLC 2.0. So if you update professional learning communities so that they do focus on that question 3, then, that's really one and the same. So we were very deliberate about that, to set up that structure so that we could get that carry forward. I would say as well that having the time that we have with our administrators, 7 days, 9 days, actually we have with them a year, that builds team, that builds a focus, that creates a division level school-based leadership partnership that's quite helpful. That builds a relationship whereby administrators feel that, I can take some risk in this environment. If I try something for good purpose and it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Just like the kid who tries to attempt something in a learning episode and it fails miserably. Okay, you learn from that, your failures, and move forward. So we've also basically not only had principals and vice principals involved in the collaborative response work, but we expanded the teams in schools. So that's been quite helpful as well. So in larger schools come through these collaborative response meetings with Curtis with 4 people, principal, vice principal, and 2 other people. So now you have that nucleus of 4 people. These 4 people become the change agents back in the school. And it just helps the school administrators to distribute those leadership functions to those 2 people. And now the 4 of them can do breakout sessions and move forward. So I see those, supports have been very beneficial. They continue partnering with Curtis, and other members of the team, yourself included, for the dossier training and so on, have all been an important part of our recipe. Well, in time, we hope to get to a place where the collaborative response personnel, or the Jigsaw Learning personnel, would be like the analogy I used, Jim Collins's analogy I used a little earlier, that it's just a timely push of the wheel from time to time, and we're more reliant. But I see that as a ways off, because we are now moving in new layers. So, for example, we are doing more deliberate PD with our EAs. I mentioned that a little earlier. Next year, we're introducing a new approach whereby the literacy and numeracy leads from Jigsaw You're Learning will partner with members of my team here, the literacy and numeracy personnel, and together we'll visit some schools and do some deep diving, unpacking, informing, engaging in professional conversation to build that capacity at the school level, and to turn them on to, in a more significant kind of way, to collaborative response as the way forward. And yeah, so it's been messy, a little bit messy. Some people, if they were in a drone above capturing all of the episodes, they might say, gee, they look like they're confused, and probably we have been from time to time, but it's sort of an organized chaos approach that's trying to establish a somewhat gentle culture, but a culture that's focused on, we're here for business. We have the most important job in a society to do, to educate our young people, and we have to take that seriously. So they might have seen us as starting and stopping, but we're still moving forward. We're heading down the road here, and we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for some structures we have in place that we've meshed with and partnered with Curtis and team to move some things forward here. Some of our staff, by the way, just another little note, based on the recognition that we've really zeroed in on this as our focus, we've had some staff participating in the Collaborative Response Symposium, and have come back and shared at an Administrators Association meetings some of their learning. And they've said, it really helped them fine tune their knowledge base, and they're in an even better position to move forward now. We also have, I just mentioned one other thing, a cohort of 21 staff who are doing a Master of Education degree from the University of Alberta. And they're now 7 courses in, so they're about 60% through. Many of them are principals and vice principals. Several of them have become administrators since they've joined on. I had the good fortune and pleasure of teaching them one course last spring. And certainly that was a real lot of fun, and I've remained connected with a lot of them. So they keep reaching out to me, but in my course, and I know Paul taught a course, we were deliberate about, or I was for sure, and I think Paul may have been, wrapping in collaborative response as a vehicle for change, and impressing upon them the importance of being change adept versus change inept, and being a change agent, and what it means to be a change agent. And I'm pleased to say that at least one person, maybe two, are looking at studying change models for change that are deemed effective in reculturing schools. And obviously collaborative response is going to be a part of that person's work and perhaps capstone paper. So that's good to know.
So Jeff, as you're continuing with those highlights, are there any other celebrations around the implementation of collaborative response that you want to make sure that gets shared?
Yeah, I think that where we were and where we are, like in the 4 years since I've been here, like the focus on achievement in literacy and numeracy is the talk of the town. It's really what the conversation is now about. Not that we're ignoring social studies and science. I'm a former trained science person. We're not ignoring those other subjects, but what we're saying is that the keys to success for all of those other disciplines is literacy and numeracy. So I would say that I'm really happy about that. I've already mentioned the buy-in that I believe has been unfolding within our schools. There's a lot less kickback to our benchmark assessments now. When we talk about common assessments, when we talk about scope and sequence, 2 years ago, scope and sequence, and the conversation would have been that, that's teacher autonomy and you can't do that. That's not the same anymore. One person said, you might hear that. And I said, yes, I know. I see that as a bit of a red herring because, what teachers have autonomy over are all the strategies and approaches that they decide they're going to use and how they set their classroom up. They don't have autonomy over what gets taught, and they may not have autonomy over the sequencing of when it gets taught. That's a prerogative of a jurisdiction if you feel that that's what's required to move things forward. But I think that there's been There've been much to, there's been lots to celebrate there. I mentioned our literacy and numeracy frameworks and the positive buy-in of administrators there. They're saying this is excellent. They're going to take that back to their staff. They see this as a way of really focusing in. We basically said, look, we're trying to build a culture where we focus in on a smaller number of things so that we are much more effective. A guy, Larry Ainsworth, wrote a book one time called The Power Standards. And he said, the power standards are those outcomes that meet three criteria. One, there are things you need to know to be successful at the next grade level. Two, things you need to know to be successful on large scale assessments like PATS and DIPS. And three, things you need to know because they have implications for broader life circumstances. And if you put your outcomes in those three areas and zero in, that's the sweet spot of instruction that you really need to zero in on. We're having a lot more conversations about that, and I'm very happy about that piece of it. We have built, I think, more capacity amongst our administrators around disaggregating data. They, realize that, what, it is important to be able to tell whether or not males are outperforming females or females are underperforming males or outperforming males in certain areas. It is important to know who's struggling in your school. Who are they? Who are their moms and dads? Do they have siblings in the school? So in the book that Curtis and Company wrote, personalizing the data. Years ago, we used to do that when we had students at risk, and we had principals say, we used to say to principals at the time, it's got to go beyond just numbers. People need to know that, Fred Flintstone is struggling, and I taught his brother 2 years ago, and I'm teaching his sister now. And their mom and dad owns the local store. It brings a different meaning to the data. So I think we've really grown in leaps and bounds there. And I think that's the result of the collaborative response work that Curtis has been doing, and we've tried to support that in some fashions. And I'm happy about the overall attitude about academic press. I think that probably 3 or 4 years ago or 2 years ago, perhaps not everybody heard about what academic press is. I will say to you that it's my view, if you consult our administrators now in our system and ask them if they've heard about academic press, they're probably going to chuckle and say, oh yes, we've heard about academic press. And what does it mean? And how does it translate into what they do at the school level? You'll get a good earful about that in a positive way, I do believe. A long time ago, I read a book from DeFore and Company that talked about, if we're going to really put our money where our mouths are and say success for all, like Peace River School Division. And I've said in some meetings, right now I'm going to change our mission. It's really success for most or many. And if we're going to say success for all, we got to get beyond ensuring that those who won the genetic lottery are those that are successful. And as Curtis points out in his book, beyond the ones who won the education lottery, i.e. they've been with excellent teachers 3 years in a row. We got to get beyond all of that and say that it's success for all. Even children who have major challenges in their learning or major challenges in their lives can still be academically successful and socially, emotionally successful and successful in the other domains with that deliberate focus on collaborative response. And so we're getting there. And, I'm very happy to be partnering with collaborative response in the way that we have been. And, it is a wonderful, wonderful model of change, a lot of hard work, but it's sustained and deliberate. It's, as I've said before, it's basically strategic, it's systematic, it becomes systemic, and it really becomes that shared, sustained approach of focusing in on a small number of things and doing it well. And I'm looking forward to the next stint of time that I'm here, but I feel very happy that the organization has taken a giant step forward to better respond to the educational needs of a wide range of children in the system.
Jeff, I know as an assistant superintendent, your time is incredibly valuable. So I thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us and share the story of Peace River School Division. And I wish you all of the best on the journey that you're on. And I can tell that you are committed and deliberate in the approaches that you're taking. So Thank you for allowing me to be involved in just the tiny little piece that I get to be involved in, but from on behalf of our team for including us and giving us the privilege of learning alongside you.
Thank you for the opportunity. And it was, yeah, my pleasure.